They usually infect via wounds, and in most cases pruning wounds, and this is why pruning wound protection is such an important aspect of managing olive trunk diseases. They can also, so these infections can occur in olive orchards or in the propagation process. So for grapevine, these infections occur in nurseries, and we identified olive nurseries as a potential inoculum source. So we sampled the olive propagation material and 2 other stages in the nursery process, and we found that some of these pathogens were in the nurseries, and that the infections were mostly from the basal end, the bottom end of rooted cuttings and trees, potted trees. So this suggested that the inoculum sources are in the growing medium or in the potting mixture. And interestingly though, the Pseudophilomela species wasn't detected often in the nurseries. So we also screened pruning debris from olive orchards for the fruiting bodies of actually all of the trunk pathogens, and the fruiting bodies are little structures that produce the spores and then release the spores into the air. And we found the Pseudophilomela species Pycnidia, which is the fruiting bodies in the orchards. The olive industry is quite small relative to the grapevine industry, so the industry has limited products that are registered for olive trees in South Africa. So this means they also have limited pruning wound protectants, and but regardless, I did a survey to see what the producers are using, and I selected those products and some other experimental treatments, and did experiments to see how effective it is against the Pseudophilomela species, and we found that one of the products that are being used by the olive industry, which is tree seal, was the most effective. But we have to still read or do more experiments on a wider range of trunk pathogens just to get an overall idea. The pruning wounds remain susceptible for up to 42 days or longer, and this is to the Pseudophilomela species. We don't know how long it stays susceptible to other trunk pathogens, and this still has to be followed up. But the susceptibility does decrease significantly over time, and we found that the winter and spring, there was no difference in the susceptibility between winter and spring pruning. It affects the spore germination and infection, so pruning during low relative humidity can actually maybe be used as a protection measure. And then after pruning, just also apply a pruning wound protectant. The olive industry in South Africa is relatively small compared to some of the other, like the grapevine industry. There's approximately 3,100 hectares planted. So common pests of olive trees include the olive beetle, the olive lacebug, and the olive fruit fly. And then common diseases or diseases that cause the most damage is anthracnose and peacock spot disease. And then trunk diseases are often overlooked though because of its slow development, but I've recently also started receiving attention globally. The pruning of the lower branches, also called skirting, can be done to reduce the branches being exposed to shade and dew and weeds, and that further reduces the risk of disease. It's been recommended that the pruning be done, the large pruning of large branches being done in midwinter, and this is to remove diseased branches, branches that have grown too tall, or parts of branches that are obstructing sunlight. And then the skirting can also be done during midwinter, and then in spring, the regrowth from the winter pruning can be managed. and smaller cuts can be done, but this should be done after the buds have differentiated into flower buds. Trunk diseases are caused by fungal pathogens that have the ability to infect woody plants and cause symptoms such as decline of the trees or dieback of twigs and branches, and some of them also cause cankers. After recent surveys and pathogenicity studies, we found a large diversity of fungal pathogens that are associated with the olive trunk symptoms and trunk disease symptoms. And some of these have already been established pathogens before our study in other countries like in America and Italy. But we also found a lot of new species and some that haven't been associated with olive trees before. In fact, one of the fungi that was associated the most frequently is an undescribed Pseudofarmanella species.